Tharoor, is there some aspect of the budget that you think is positive? We have got your reaction of how you have dismissed the budget. Is there something that they have got it right?
Well, look, I have written articles advocating the mining of rare earths, so I can't say that that's a bad idea. It's a good idea. At the same time, it'll take 15 years to be realized. You don't do this overnight. It takes time to mine them, to create the infrastructure, and to do the processing. And so we're about 15 years away from reducing our dependence on importing rare earths. But at least, you know, a well begun is half done kind of thing, but it's still only a case of better late than never. There's nothing much else to applaud. Otherwise, I'm afraid as an MP from Kerala, I'm deeply disappointed by the way in which the government has sort of completely reduced Kerala to an invisible Kerala. Should be the new hashtag for the state. Instead of incredible India, whatever, we have invisible Kerala. We contribute to the nation's skilled workforce, remittances, tourism, but we're invisible to the government. Everything we were expecting and looking for, nothing has come. So it's been truly disappointing. There may be things for which they haven't yet spelled out the details, even in the budget document. They've talked about creating an All India Institute for Ayurveda. We assume that Kerala, as the place that has done more than any other place in India to keep Ayurveda alive, will be a beneficiary of one of those All India Institutes. We're still waiting, though, 12 years since the first ever NDA budget for the aims that was promised in that budget. It still hasn't come to Kerala. We're waiting for progress in railway connectivity. There were mentions of 7 new high-speed rail corridors, but this dense state of Kerala has not been given, despite repeated requests from the state government for a rapid transit rail corridor. We have a major port in Vizhinjam, and again, in referring to ports, there was no reference to Kerala. Inland waterways were talked about with ship repair for inland waterways in Patna and Varanasi. Kerala has more inland waterways than the rest of the country put together practically, but we have no such facility announced for us. Our coastal development, our port-led development has been neglected. There's nothing to protect the coastline. We're losing territory every year from our coast to coastal erosion. The state government says they don't have any money. The central government says it's not their problem. So one thing after another, I'm afraid all I'm seeing is a disappointment after disappointment from Kerala's point of view.
Okay, that's a long list of disappointment that has been put out by Dr. Shashi Tharoor, Jay Panda. Why has the finance minister, or should I say the Union Budget 2026, invisibilized Kerala? It's a beautiful country, God's own country, and also a pole-bound state. You are looking at expanding your footprints there.
First of all, my friend Shashi Tharoor, at least occasionally, finds some things palatable and good for the country in the various budgets over the years. But unfortunately, the opposition largely just tries to see things negatively, and they have continually been proven wrong again and again, year after year after year. Like this year, we have heard many opposition leaders talk about nothing in the budget, nothing for the common man, etc. And it is precisely during these last 11, 12 years that India has surged dramatically economically. We have been the fastest growing large economy for many years now, I think 7 or 8 years continually. We have become the best managed economy among the large economies. For example, if you look at our fiscal deficit, I compliment Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman to stick to her commitment of bringing down fiscal deficit below 4.5%, targeting 4.3% next year. This is critical because this gives you the fiscal headroom to invest in people and to invest in infrastructure, which is exactly what the Modi government has been doing for more than a decade. Also, another example of how the budget is one of the best managed in the world is our debt to GDP ratio at 55%. Is very, very well managed. I mean, if you look at countries like the US, you look at European nations like the UK, even otherwise earlier well-managed nations like Japan and Singapore, they have 2 to 3 times of the debt to GDP ratio that India has. They have, some of them have 50% or more higher fiscal deficit than we have. So what has all this meant? It has meant a huge improvement in infrastructure. The number of airports have been doubled in the last 10 years compared to what was built in the previous 75 years. Look at jobs. If you see the last jobs report that came out in October of last year, it pointed out that between 2017 and 2023, there was a 17 crore increase in the number of jobs. And that is huge by any measure. Now, if you look at the programs that the government has run, that for 800 million people, it runs a food grain program. So my point is, this year, in this budget, the targeted funding of schemes that will create jobs. Now, Shashi did mention that Kerala has a tradition not just of Ayurveda, but of health practitioners, of nurses, of other such practitioners, caregivers. And this is a major thrust area of this budget. Kerala, along with many other states, will benefit immensely. The high-speed rail corridors, which cross 8 states, each of them is like creating new mega airports along the line, because that's the kind of multiplier effect it will have. I want to conclude by saying this. The opposition had got used for many decades that the budget would be focusing on the minutiae and forgetting the achievement of larger objectives. This has been flipped upside down, and the major objectives have been managed extremely well. The proof of the pudding is the 250 million people that have been pulled out of poverty, which is the highest in this century by any nation.
Okay, but Jay Panda, the concerns of Dr. Tharoor hasn't been addressed here. But I must compliment both of you that I have been doing this interview of a face-off between two of you for years now, and you have been very magnanimous in agreeing all the time. But Dr. Shashi Tharoor, the Treasury benches see a long list of things that they are doing, particularly keeping in mind the geopolitical uncertainties, the turbulence times that we are living in. That is the reason why multiple FTAs have been worked out, understanding fully well that there is an unpredictable White House. Will you not compliment Finance Minister and the government for something, for getting the FTAs right at least?
Well, let me come to that in a minute. The FTAs are the Commerce Minister, not the Finance Minister. But sure, I have a lot of good things to say about that. But before that, let me respond to my friend Jay, because honestly, for him to talk about how happy he is with the fiscal deficit going down from 4.5 to 4.4 to 4.3 next year, well, I've been around in Parliament long enough, and so is he in the old days, even if he was in the wrong house at the time, to remember the former Finance Minister Arun Jaitley announcing very grandly that his objective was to bring the fiscal deficit down to 3.5%. So we are a very long way from there. The numbers have been scaled up considerably since the late Finance Minister announced that target, and now we're supposed to be applauding 4.3. There's some discipline there, I agree, but at the same time, it's a long way from where the NDA intended to be 10 years ago. Secondly, when he talks about jobs, this macro picture of large numbers of people getting jobs, I'm not sure where that comes from, because I've got a very concrete example to give you. When 8,868 railway jobs were advertised, there were 12 million applicants for those jobs. That's 1,370 applicants per job. You think that's reflecting a high employment situation in our country? In Jaipur, 53,000 peon positions were advertised, 2.5 million people applied for them. There were 187 Home Guard posts advertised in Sambalpur, 8,000 applicants. And these are people with college degrees and PhDs for jobs that require an 8th grade pass or a high school graduation. We are looking at a country where, unfortunately, the educated unemployed are literally all over the place. So yes, Jay, I can applaud rare earths as a long-term prospect in the distant future, but the rare earths are under the ground, and a lot of what you're saying is building castles in the air. And that's something that truly worries me. Now, to come to your question on FTAs, yes, I do believe the FTAs are necessary and are a good idea. And I applaud the negotiators of the government of India, especially, I suppose, the Commerce Minister rather than the Finance Minister. Nothing against the Finance Minister, it's just not her particular bailiwick. But having said that, we really will now have to see this translating into two things: significantly enhanced exports of items manufactured in India, and thereby generating more jobs for Indians in India. When that happens, we will have a lot more to applaud. Right now, there's a signature. We've lost a significant portion of the large American market, and we hope to replace it with a large European market. But the agreement is not yet enforced. This is not going to happen overnight. There are procedures in the European Union which have yet to be undergone before the agreement can come into force. So let's hold our breath, but I'm not at all unwilling to applaud something that does good for my country and my people. That's a cardinal principle, I think, of democratic politics. And I'm willing to applaud
Okay.
it, but let's get there and let's see the tangible benefits. Right now, the
So,
benefits
Okay.
Gina is talking about are not visible on the ground in
Okay.
the life of
Jay
the
Panda,
Amar.
respond to that.
So, yes, so while I thank Shashi for applauding some parts of the budget, I think, being such a wordsmith that he is, he dances around some of the facts and figures which I think need a bit more light. So, my late friend Arun Jaitley's targets for the fiscal deficit was pre-COVID. As Shashi knows very well, the COVID pandemic upset the economies of the entire world and everybody went into double digits. India too went into double digits. From that to come back to 4.4% now, keep in mind the US at 6.3 or 6.4% is 50% higher fiscal deficit than India. With the debt to GDP ratio of 55%, other nations like UK, US, Singapore and Japan are 300 to 400% higher than India. So yes, indeed, Nirmala ji has managed the economy extremely well under the leadership of Prime Minister Modi. I also wanted to just add a few things, which is that it's understandable when people want to apply for government jobs because the mindset that the previous decades under the Congress had built up in India was that the government jobs were the only jobs available. And the good thing is, under the Modi government, in just the last year, the data received, the government jobs have gone up by 111%. But to counter that mindset that it's only the government that provides jobs, the Modi government has had a major thrust on the startup ecosystem. India has become the third largest startup ecosystem. Large numbers of women are being entrepreneurs. Now this new thing about Lakpati Didis going into crores of women is being translated and gear shifted in this budget to make them micro and small entrepreneurs. The big thrust on MSME, small industries, is going to be transformational for India.